Hello everyone, and welcome to a rather unusual redstone video. I'm not sure I've done something like this before. It all started with this video here, my dried kelp block crafter. I had so much fun creating this contraption. This was an approach to smelting kelp where we could automatically convert them into dried kelp blocks to smelt the kelp and then take the excess output, so essentially a dried kelp block farm. And the one-wide tileable approach to this was a really fun challenge. I always like doing the one-wide stuff. The issue is it's not always the best way to go about doing things. You see, I had a comment on that video that said, this uses a lot of resources. I don't think it's a very good design. And that's when it hit me. I'd become so focused on creating a one-wide tileable design that I didn't really notice this does indeed use a stupid amount of resources. This then sent me on a little redstone adventure to think about other approaches to smelting these kelp materials. So in preparation for that video, I realized that if you wanted to use a hopper chain to feed items into these smokers, they would need to be 12 wide. And I even had a comment pointing out that if you used a furnace as well, then you could maximize the amount of materials that can move through the hopper chain, as this would give you 12.5 because the furnace is twice as slow as the smoker. Twice as slow or half the speed? Half the speed is definitely correct. Is twice as slow the right saying? Of course, you could continue to tile this further if you used a different delivery mechanism like ice, but I decided to think, okay, let's use this mechanism, let's make it 12 wide, and let's get rid of all of this redstone we got here at the back. And this is how I realized the error of my ways, because this essentially does the same thing. We only need one crafter for all of the dried kelp coming through, and this thing can point upwards, so then we need two droppers to elevate it to this level. We can of course use the observers here to power the crafter, and then power the droppers, and then it's going to feed it into this chain of hoppers, which is where all of the dried kelp goes. Oh, and you see this message? We're going to come back to that in just a second, because I am yet to simulate this, but in theory I think it works. So yeah, kelp across the top, fuel across this chain here. These hoppers fill up with it to put it into the smoker, so once they're full, it will go all the way to the end of this chest, and the row of hoppers at the bottom is to move the dried kelp to the crafter. As you can see, a minimal amount of redstone, a lot less resources than before. And let's say you wanted these things perfectly side by side, you could probably shuffle this redstone around so it's just back in this line here. Okay, now the reason I said that message was important is because previously we were simulating farms like this, and when you have this running and no player is online, all of these entities actually build up. Now they will despawn at 6,000, so after 4 ticks, and remember there's 20 ticks in a second, these items then disappear, but that requires the player to be nearby. So thanks to me, I have crashed our beautiful redstone server on occasion, which is, yeah, all my fault. But then I came up with a better solution, which was to target the block below rather than spawn the items. So we used the data merge block command, and then we simply tell it that we want, 64 bamboo inside of the first slot. So 20 times a second, it updates this. It's always got bamboo in it. And I should really turn this off when I'm not using it, but it won't crash the server, which is wonderful. So that was a bit of a distraction, but we're going to use that command block tech here to do a test run on this setup. And I've got a pro tip for you when you're doing this stuff. Once you put the items into the smoker, or any other block like this, control middle click it, and it will save the contents. So when we come over to here, it's now got these items inside. The bug with that though, is that for some reason it doesn't then animate, but we do know that all of these are going to be working. And same thing goes for the hoppers, so I can control middle click this, put the next one here, and it's full up with kelp. And a quick message from me in the editing room. If you are enjoying this video, please do consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. Thank you for listening. Let's now crack on with the video. So now the whole thing is fully stocked and it's running in the mode where the excess dried kelp will now make its way down to this chest at the end. And you can actually just sit here and watch it slowly tick up because it's pretty fast. But of course, occasionally your fuel's going to run out of the front and it's going to want an extra block to go into those. If we now listen to what's going on at the redstone here, we can see it as well. It activates rather frequently. If we open up this crafter, we can see that the items continuously feed in. You may be wondering if it backs up, and it does look like it does a little, but occasionally this then drains away again. So it keeps on top of the speed that the items are being fed to it, so this isn't ever going to back up, and that's proof that it works. But our little adventure here with the dried kelp block smelting isn't over yet, because I got another comment asking, well, what happens if you don't feed in a steady supply of kelp? I would say that you build this to your means, so you should make sure that there's a steady flow of kelp coming in, but if that isn't the case, then you might want to make a smaller array, or we might want to manage the kelp that's coming in from a smaller farm. This led me to create this nifty little contraption over here, which essentially stockpiles kelp until you have a certain amount, and then lets it flow out into what would be your furnace array. That's what we can imagine these chests are. This could create a steady and consistent flow of kelp that would stop some of your fuel from being wasted when smelting items. When we look at it from the back, it's probably easy to understand what's going on, because this is where our kelp would feed into, this large chest here. We're locking the hopper that lets it go into the chest on this side, and we're also locking the one that lets it flow out of the other side. So we can let all of the kelp build up in here, and then of course we can switch these over by moving these to their opposite sides when we want that side to drain out. So on this side we have a nifty little mechanism where you can decide how many items you want to fill up by changing the size of this crafter. The more of these slots we fill in, the more items it's going to fill up inside of this chest. So with these comparators, it can meet when that threshold of items in the chest is met. And on this other side, we create a redstone signal only when the chest goes from having items in it to having none. Those signals power these two pistons, so when the threshold is met, it will swap over, so now the items will start filling up in the other side, and when it's fully drained out, it's going to switch back over to letting items in again. The idea here is that you would assure you would have a large bulk of kelp in here before feeding it into your smelter array, and this would minimize the amount of loss. Now let's look at the container signal strengths, specifically for the double chest which we're using. What you'll notice with these numbers is that none of them easily divide into 20, and 20 is obviously the amount of items that we smelt with a single kelp block. And it occurs to me now that it could be possible to store some sort of dummy items inside of here that never actually get filtered out. You'd probably have to put an item filter below this thing, which would make it more complicated, and then it might mess with the signal detection on this side, as there's always be items inside of the chest. Anyways, I really want to show you this thing in action, but you might just have to take my word for it because it's really slow. We've got to wait for all the items to fill up in here. Yeah, so this means that you could end up with a smaller build-up of items on the opposite side. And this is why this contraption has ended up in this video. I just wanted to share the sort of thought process behind this, because it doesn't always lead to a perfect solution. But it is certainly useful to be able to evenly split up stack sizes and then funnel them into different outputs. Anyways, if we go back to the Minecraft wiki for a moment, there was actually one signal strength that would divide down, and that would be the hopper. When it is perfectly full, we get 5 stacks of items, and that can be divided by 20. So yeah, 64 times 5, divide it by 20, and we get an even number. So I went and rebuilt this entire contraption for use with hoppers, which meant you needed a few extra redstone blocks to let the items fill up inside of the hopper. Oh, and it's this one here that fills up. Yeah, that's right. And here is the redstone. Not the most compact thing, but it's pretty cool. And this led me to another idea, but this one is very much unfinished. If we have a bunch of dummy items inside of here, we can create a redstone signal when we add 20 more items in, which is the amount we want to separate for one lot of smelting, because that's how much the dried kelp does. As you can see here though, it doesn't fully take out those because you need a clock that is the right amount. So this simple decay clock is just enough for 10 items. And I feel like there's going to be a lot of edge cases depending on how many items you put inside of that chest, and this thing was going to get a lot more complicated, so I just kind of left it there. And I might come back to that idea at one point, but now I want to show you something completely unrelated. Well, actually, it's not really unrelated to this project. You see, all of this reminded me of a project from Season 6 of Hermitcraft. Of course, smelting items is a way, over time, to store up some XP. So, back in the Season 6 world, and no, I'm not talking about this project here. And believe it or not, it's not this project either, although this was a place to come and pick up experience points from furnaces. Looks like I never got around to restocking this thing again. That is probably because we built an even bigger and better system in the underground mall. Oh yeah, there it is, the XP Vault. This was an amazing project. Aha, look at this, arrays of furnaces with items ready to be taken out. Okay, let's do that again so we can actually see our XP level. That only gave me 5. I'm not sure what state I left this contraption in, but the idea was that it would give you enough XP to fully mend a diamond tool. And after you're done taking out some of the dye, you're also supposed to press this button. So behind all this is the madness of zero-tick farms, an exploit that's been removed from the game. That's how we got our fuel and how we got our cactus. And then we have one of those classic one-wide tileable designs, kind of bringing it back around to what we talked about at the beginning of this video. So the idea was that the dye would back up into the furnace, and when it's taken and the button is pressed, it should get rid of all of the green dye down below, so it can fill back up again. And when it's filled up, it's got enough XP to repair your tools. So as you can imagine, I wanted to come back to this project and see if we could take advantage of our new tools like the crafter and the copper bulb to make this even better. This design, however, is currently unfinished, and I hit that kind of point where I realized that the one-wide tileable nature was probably going to be holding me back. You see, the original design unfortunately doesn't work anymore. You might have noticed it was broken when we were in the Season 6 world. And now we need more XP to be stored before being dispensed because we've got netherite tools. Now the crafter could be useful in this because you could take the items that you've smelted, craft them up into one block and dispense that at a time, as opposed to dispensing items one by one, so this could be a little quicker. But the issue here is the amount of XP that you get from something like dried kelp. And this is why we use cactus in these sorts of farms, because it gives you 10 times the amount of experience. So those factors and a bunch of other considerations may lead to a contraption you'll see on this channel soon, but I'm pretty sure when I redesign this, it's not going to be one wide anymore. And so if you've enjoyed this video, please do let me know your thoughts with a comment down below. It's really quite different. I wasn't sure if walking you through some of my unfinished redstone contraptions and the different challenges that you run into would be entertaining or not, so please do let me know. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you soon with another. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.